Well, hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Higher Line Podcast. We've got a special one today with Dr. Peter Kim. Dr. Kim specializes in family medicine and longevity. And we are going to talk with you guys today on how to extend life by adding value and by making some choices that really take out the big picture problems rather than go chase the little tiny things that maybe don't make much improvement. It's going to help us find some of those big ticket items that can make big improvements so that we can train jujitsu longer, take our kids to the park longer, be happy longer, and really enjoy. So let's dig right in with Dr. Peter Kim. Welcome to another episode of the Carry Trainer Higher Line Podcast. Hey gang, welcome to yet another episode of the Carry Trainer Higher Line Podcast. When we started this podcast now nearly 10 years ago, the idea was to bring you guests and friends to help us live a longer life, to live a fuller life. That's kind of the message of our brand. And so today we bring you Dr. Peter Kim, who is a medical doctor specializing in family practice and sports medicine. And you've got a practice that you really are trying to help people live a long, full life, right?
Yep. Yep.
Talk about that, Doc.
Well, most people are aware of trying to expand their lifespan, but there's a concept now of health span also that's out there.
Hmm.
Uh, so the idea that you not only want to add the years to your life, but life to your years. And so in sports medicine, we try and, at a trivial level, help people who get injured as they are doing their sports or their physical activity, help them optimize their performance. But that carries over to the idea of longevity in that we want people not only to live longer, but to be active, among other things, active, healthy, and happy in the years that they have. Uh, and that's where my focus is because it's been a personal interest of mine being into martial arts pretty much my whole life, but much more seriously now for the past 6 or 7 years because I'm not getting any younger. And I had a bunch of family responsibilities, work responsibilities, and I put the training aside. And I realized if I don't push and do this now, it ain't never going to happen.
Sure.
So, so that was something that I took on for myself. And then I realized it wasn't just me who was interested in doing stuff like this. There are a lot of 40, 50, 60 year olds and older who said, I'm not ready to give this up. I want to keep doing this as well, but I've had fill in the blank. I've had multiple injuries. I've had people telling me I'm too old for this. I'm not sure I can do this. I'm not sure I can do this anymore at the level I was. And I said, that sounds awfully familiar. So that's where I try to bring my experience to bear and help people out who are in the same kind of boat.
It's interesting nowadays with I guess maybe the advent of the internet, but like, we're probably near the same age generation. You see older folks, and it was just accepted that as you got older, you just, this is what you do. You sit on the park bench, and every once in a while, like as a kid, I remember meeting some grandpa or, father that was like doing backflips, and you're like, how's that
Mm-hmm.
possible? Where these other
Mm-hmm.
dudes are all, sitting on the porch all the time.
Yeah.
And now you're starting to see a lot of people talk about strength training as we
Mm-hmm.
age, which is,
Yep.
something that I'm a
Critical.
big proponent of. Talk a little bit about how like trends have changed and like what is kind of new and improved in that space.
Yeah, I mean, living and working in Southern California, of course, there's a lot of emphasis on cosmetics and people, staying young and looking young and being vital. But a lot of activity is, it's not about how you look; it's about how well you can perform. And so, how you train underneath that's very different. So, while a medical practice may have a lot of like Botox and PRP and other things that may be more in terms of how the skin looks and how people's hair growth is. The interest in the active community is much more of can I keep doing XYZ? And there are
Hmm.
a lot of people who are active in California, where I practice in Orange County, California. There are just a ton of martial arts gyms. I mean, it was stunning to me when I started looking about 5, 10 years ago. But there's kendo out here. I mean, actual Japanese kendo. There's kendo There's all these classic East Asian martial arts. There's all the southeastern styles. There's boxing. There's wrestling. There's combat submission wrestling, kind of catch can wrestling. Of course, jujitsu. All the flavors of jujitsu. The Gracie, the Gracie affiliates. It's just astonishing how much martial arts you can find out here. And there's a ton of people who want to do that, and that's their emphasis. So the trends, in popular media have kind of also shaded over into the real life community. One of the favorite shows that my kids and I watch is the Golden Girls, and those characters who look like they actually look on screen like they're probably in their 70s. They're supposed to be in like their 60s, 50s and 60s, and that awareness that you can be you can be older than 40 and still not only be active in your community, but also be physically active. That's kind of been gradually trickling down into real life, but it's been a thing. And especially in martial arts where there's like kids classes, there's a lot of 30, 40-year-old plus who take their kids and they're sitting off on the side watching their kids rolling around on the mat. And it's invariable that it's inevitable that they're going to look and say, maybe I can take some classes there too. And
Hmm.
that's a segue for a lot of people is, their kids are taking the class. They thought, maybe I'll try a class or two. And then suddenly they're on the mat. So it's something I applaud. Intense physical activity is something that you need to do, my experience, you need to do kind of sensibly, but the more intense activity level is still something we are capable of as we get older. You have to kind of dial it up or down based on your situation. But without doing that, it's there are a lot of physiologic and medical benefits you get from strength training, from getting your cardio up, doing mobility on the regular, and so forth. But especially things like strength training and other activities like martial arts and things that if you're doing it less intensely, you're not getting nearly as much benefit. Uh,
Hmm.
so I think it really correlates pretty well with what we now know in healthcare as being something to advise everybody to do.
What year is it now? 2026. So the last few years, COVID and all that, people have taken a a big step back from modern medicine, I think, just as in
Oh
general,
yeah.
like, nobody trusts their doctor anymore. Nobody trusts the pharmaceutical companies. Nobody trusts, I mean, not nobody, but it seems like people younger than 50 have a much easier time saying F the doctors, F the
Oh yeah.
community of
Yeah.
medicine. And, for example, cholesterol's bad, statins are good. Now cholesterol maybe's not so bad, statins maybe aren't so good. And I see the look on your face. Or blood pressure changing is what's the baseline numbers, or
Hmm.
dietary stuff. I remember as a kid sitting in my grandma's kitchen with one of her friends, and I don't know why this memory is in my head, but two gals talking, smoking cigs, and
Hmm.
one of them lost some weight, and she kept saying low fat, no fat. I'm just on the low fat, no fat diet. You remember that was
Hmm.
like the thing in the
Yeah.
80s, like, low fat, no fat. And
Things have changed.
she kept
Yeah.
saying she just goes through the grocery store and buys everything's low fat, no fat. And of course, we know so much of that stuff is trash.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
grew up eating meat and vegetables, and now
Hmm.
it's like my dad was doing like Atkins stuff when he knew that man, like, when that was just some fringe stuff. And I'm not touting any diet, but like bacon was bad.
Hmm.
Now you see pictures where people are like, I just ate a pound of bacon. Like,
Hmm.
it's
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. No.
how can science, that's the point I was trying to make. So, like, the whole idea of science is we can
Yeah.
test this thing and
Exactly.
replicate it,
Yep.
but how can we have such a broad a acceptance of, this is a fact? No, it's not a
Yeah.
fact.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a great question. It's a an issue that my patients and I deal with every single day, and that I write about, on my posts and stuff on social. You see it in primary care because that's the pointy tip of the spear where healthcare meets what people have as real world questions when they come to their doctor. If they come to their doctor, it usually is their primary care doctor they come and say about this. On their physical, they ask questions about, diet and exercise and what should I be doing. Um, the science is the field is more than just the medical science, unfortunately, or fortunately or unfortunately. Because science basically says you got a great idea, wonderful, let's test it and see if it works. And that's the basis of a lot of the advice I give to my patients. I'm like, look, I have no vested interest in what diet you eat, whether you get a vaccine or not. My duty is done when I tell you what the pluses and minuses are. Now it's up to you to do with that what you will. But at the end of the day, if we can test the answer to what you're doing is helping you or not, let's do that. And then I'll tell you, if you need to, let's pick something universal, right? If you're diabetic, that's not great compared to you being non-diabetic, okay? Because we know bad things happen when your blood sugar goes wacky. All right. There's this well-established, no argument level of blood sugar you should have. It should be below this, above that. You don't want to take medicine. Okay, fine. You want to do this funky diet. Let's go for it. Let's test your blood sugar in a few weeks or in a month or two and see how it looks. And if the blood sugar's down, hey, you're not going to hear a peep out of me. Rah, rah, keep going. But if your blood sugar is 3 times higher than it should be, we're going to talk. Okay. We can test it and tell you if it's helping you or not. And if it works, that's great. But how's that working for you? That's sort of the mantra. How's that, is it working for you or not? And if the answer is no, it's like, hey man, your pancreas doesn't care.
Right, right, right.
Whatever you're hooked on, whatever your belief is, whatever end of the political spectrum you come from, your pancreas doesn't care. Your arteries do not have a say in the matter. It's just a matter of, are you clogging up or not? Are your numbers off the scale or not? And so that's where I think it comes down to, for me, working one-on-one with individuals. But a lot of people have lost their faith in traditional medicine. Certainly, most everybody has lost their faith in pharma, which I think is not a bad a bad position to take. To not trust that. Um, there's a lot of stuff out there, some of which is just bizarre, but some of it sounded bizarre, and now it's that not that bizarre.
Give me an
Um,
example.
so, the classic story you hear when you see like a TED talk, a successful TED talk that goes viral, and there are a lot of people who got their start who are very well known now who had a TED talk that just blew up. Okay, it's a very very similar story. Um, I was I was happy and walking through life as a whatever, fill in the blank, as a scientist over at so and so, or as a medical person, and then my kid got this weird disease, and my kid was really suffering. They couldn't get out of bed. They were crying all the time. They just couldn't focus, whatever. And I took my child to 10 specialists, 3 medical centers. And they told me that they couldn't diagnose him, or he had this condition that was very rare and there was no treatment. And I was like, "To hell with that. I'm going to go find it." So I went and full time I researched the hell out of this on the internet. And I found that there's a potential diet by some obscure person in Sweden who said if you cut back on XYZ in your diet, you eliminate the gluten, you take this out, you supplement with this special omega, that they're going to get better. And so I was like, I'm going to do this, and I did it, and my kid got 10 times better, and that's why I'm here in front of you now telling you the story. Okay. That kind of story happens a lot, and unfortunately, part of that story usually is I went to my doctors and they couldn't help me. So
Hmm.
I was like, I'm not going to sit back and just let my kid die. I'm going to fix this. Um, and that resonates with an awful lot of people. And so things like low gluten, or a gluten-free diet, that was something that was in the medical community, that was considered really, really fringe stuff until we figured out, oh, there are people who are allergic to gluten. It's called celiac disease. And there's people who are sensitive and not full-blown allergic to gluten, and they benefit from cutting gluten out of the diet. Okay, who knew? The idea once in a while of being a vegan was just completely, if you want to do that, fine, but and now it's like, no, there absolutely are people who do pretty well when you put them on a vegetarian, whole food, plant-based, or a vegan diet. All these things we consider now as part of modern, sort of more cutting edge functional medicine. At one point, we're like, you know, in the traditional medical curriculum in med school, when I was in med school at USC, LA County USC Medical Center, The nutrition was like one lecture out of the 4-year curriculum.
I hear
Like,
that a lot from all the
yeah,
docs I know. Yeah.
yeah, very very little time. I mean, you were given a nod, and you were given some training, and you could go talk to the professor if you wanted, but it wasn't like a main part of the curriculum. Functional medicine, which I believe is really, it has become much more popular now, and I think it's a good thing. 80% of the curriculum is nutrition focused. I mean, it's most, at least, one, it's 80%, another, it's like 2/3. But a majority of your curriculum is learning about nutrition and how it affects your health and chronic conditions. Because most of chronic conditions, it turns out, come from your own body's immune system taking a dislike to you and attacking bits and pieces of you. If
Hmm.
your immune system doesn't like your skin, you get eczema. If it doesn't like your lungs, you get asthma, and so forth. And you could argue that even heart disease, heart attack, which is the number one cause of death in the developed world, in America, more people die from heart attack than all the cancer deaths combined. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You could argue that heart attack, it has an inflammatory component where your body's immune system causes some inflammation in your blood vessels, which have these fatty plaques in them, causing those fatty plaques to be more prone to rupturing. When they pop open, a blood clot forms, plugs the artery, 100% heart attack. That heart attacks have an inflammatory immune system based component. And it turns out that about 80% of your immune system sits in your gut. By weight, the majority of your immune system is in your colon. And so if you eat stuff that disrupts your digestion, you're poking your finger in the eye of your immune system, and it goes sideways and it starts having weird things happen. And that's something that wasn't really well known or promoted as much. And now it's actually pretty well known. So a lot of things we learn them kind of the hard way. And sometimes we hear them from sources we kind of like, but over time it comes back to the how's that working for you idea. You
Hmm.
know, a lot of the things in science, in regular, physics and chemistry and so forth, came from people saying, how about this? And you're like, well, okay, fine, we'll test it. And like,
Yeah.
oh crap, yeah. It's
So,
like, okay, yeah.
something interesting about that food stuff. I'm not a scientist. Uh, my parents, I just stopped at my mom and dad's house this morning on my way over here to say goodbye to a sister who's traveling abroad and had some breakfast with my mom. So growing up, uh, soda, pop, that was like you stole it when you were at grandma's house. Like that was never something that was at the house.
Right.
Candy was, if you could scrounge it at the gas station or friends' houses, but it was never, unless it was, Easter or
Yeah,
Halloween or
yeah,
something, it just
yeah.
wasn't there. When my mother made cookies or something like that, it was
Mm,
like real things. And we had
yeah,
plenty of like junk food stuff, but there
yeah.
just was not. We ate meat and vegetables and fruit. Like a normal breakfast before school was like eggs or oatmeal. And
Great.
like that was just what we ate. So as I grew up, that's
Yeah.
the things I still eat.
Mm,
Recently, in my area, I just did a podcast, Bennett and I did at the food co-op. Beautiful
mm,
co-op built by some
mm,
people. The president's a food scientist who
mm,
was having some health issues. And
mm,
this guy worked for like big, agricultural
mm,
corporations doing the kind of stuff that we know we shouldn't eat. So he
mm,
kind of like analyzed his life work. And now there's this beautiful co-op that sells,
mm.
amazing organic produce and stuff.
Nice.
So we do a video about it and share it on the internet. And of course, it's only for local people. You're not going to come to my little town by Chicago and shop there. But the message was these places exist. And I'd start to see the comments that place is too expensive and you can't get all the stuff you need there. And, it got me
Mm,
thinking like I can, like we
mm.
go there and we buy eggs and cream and, all the things that we eat.
Right.
But like
Right.
there's no, there's no pre-mixed coffee creamer that's got carrageenan and corn
Mm,
syrup
mm.
solids and all that
Right.
BS in it. There's
Right.
no Trix breakfast cereal, which is freaking candy that then
Yeah.
you pour, milk all over. There's not, those things
Right.
aren't there, but that shit's not food. And
Right.
so like talking about gluten even,
Mm-hmm.
I've got some family members that swear by the gluten-free diet. My wife makes bread all the time, but she gets
Mm-hmm.
like these grains that are made by
Hmm.
like, hippies in skirts, and they're grinding the stuff with
Hmm.
their, I
Yep.
don't know how they're doing it, but it's like
Yeah, yeah,
glyphosate free this and that. Like,
yeah.
is it even just the food, or is it all of these other modified,
Right.
enhanced chemical processes that we're doing to stuff that are
Hmm.
trashing us? Because people
Yeah,
always say, my grandfather smoked a pack of cigarettes and ate a pound of bacon every day and lived to be 140, like
yeah.
for outliers, but comment
Hmm.
on that stuff a little bit.
Yeah, boy, where to start? Yeah, clearly our diet is not the same as the diet that we had, growing up in the 70s and 80s, but even that's not the same as it was back in the 20s. And it's really interesting. There was a trainer who's, I mean, he's pretty well known. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy, and he was one of Pavel Tsatsouline's first senior students, a guy named Steve Maxwell. I worked with him for a while. He, in a, a client trainer relationship, and he turned me on to some dietary changes early on, really helped me out a lot. And he pointed me to a couple of books. They're still in print from these American physicians from the 1920s. And even in the 1920s, they were talking about these diseases of sort of like of wealth, and
Like
how,
gout and stuff like that.
well, just that they're, these young people who come over from the farm are really, strong, hale, and healthy. But when they come to the city and they eat, the citified diet, they develop these problems. And yeah, and that was even known back in the 20s. Okay. Um, the whole idea that there's healthier diets and healthier lifestyles goes back a long ways. It's not just limited to today with the ultra processed foods, but it's gotten a whole lot worse with the ultra processed foods. There's no way of really looking at the statistics and not noticing that there's this sharp increase in incidence of things, and our DNA hasn't changed as Homo sapiens. We haven't suddenly become a species that just is riddled with all these chronic conditions because our DNA is crappy. Clearly it's environmental. The DNA, the evolution of organisms evolves pretty slowly, and so things have just exploded over the past 100 years, and that's a blink of the eye in terms of evolutionary timescale. So it cannot be because we've evolved into sicker people. But we've had a whole lot of changes to the food supply. If you dig a little into it, you can see a lot of it's driven by um, corporate governmental policies, governmental subsidies to make certain things affordable. A
Hmm.
lot of folks who complain and say, "Oh, this is too expensive. This organic food's too expensive." Well, it is more costly, but that's because it's not the agribusiness isn't subsidized to make those foods to make the prices be artificially low. And I get it; it costs more, and standard foods, non-organic foods and so forth, cost less, and the ultra processed foods cost even less for those reasons. But that's a function of economics and policy, not a function of what's healthier for you or better for you.
Hmm.
So this is it's not coincidental that there's been this uptick in certain kinds of health conditions with certain kinds of food processes being promoted, being accelerated, becoming more widespread. So the food deserts, so that the amount of variety of real foods that people can eat, especially in certain urban centers, gets smaller and smaller and smaller and more narrow. Um, History has always had a migration of people towards urban centers. You go back 1,000 years, and people would migrate to the coast, and they'd migrate to cities around the coast because that's where the food was, and that's where the jobs were.
Yes.
And that's an ancient history thing. But in America, if you go to the center of urban centers where there are more jobs, there's cheaper housing and so forth, it's far away from places where food is actually made and grown. And so your food choices get narrower as a result of that. And that happens too. All these things combine to what we now know is this explosion in chronic conditions and chronic health problems. And of course, lifestyle makes a big difference there too. The more we're on our phones, the more we're on digital devices, the less we're outdoors, the less we're physically active, the less we're connected with each other socially and reinforcing each other. All those things that we consider nowadays to be pretty healthy, fundamental things. Being outside in the sun so your circadian rhythms are set properly.
Sun's
Being
bad for you, Doc.
Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, but a little sun isn't bad for it. Being social, having social support, um, doing inner work, doing strength work, doing cardio, all these things, they are modern life kind of curbs all those impulses. So that happens as an overlay. But underneath a lot of it is this infrastructure of the foods we eat being not so hot. And that has a big toll. Um, there's this concept that if you're running a business, right? Do you want to be in the business of competing with Apple and Microsoft by making the next iPhone or smartphone? Well, that's a tough race. That's a tough arms race. Or do you want to be in the business of making cases for iPhones? That's a whole lot easier to make, plastic cases for iPhones. You can pop those out pretty easily. Okay. Um, if you can get the infrastructure, if you can take over the infrastructure of the platform for something, you can have an awful lot of power over how things play out. You know, the idea that you would have something like unquestioned belief that fat was bad for you, and that we could take the whole conversation in America and say, and demonize fat and say we're going to create all these low fat, non fat, cookies and stuff that are just absolutely loaded up with high fructose corn sugar. They have no very little fat, and that was the problem. That was the main reason there was this explosion of heart disease and stuff. There's like a couple of generations of Americans who I mean, there were millions of people who went on the low fat bandwagon thinking that it was the healthiest thing. And so if you can control that discussion at a very early stage and have people just accept it without question, you can run with that for an awfully long time and have an awful lot of effect on folks. Um, and I think that's what people are coming to understand now is that there are these uh, largely funded, to some degree governmental, but certainly economic and corporate forces that have controlled the conversation because they've had the resources and the influence to do so. And they weren't doing it for our benefit. Our health wasn't the first thing in mind. It was their bottom line and their profit because they had, cereal to sell and whatnot. And it is what it is. But more people, I think, are becoming aware that that's where a lot of recommendations have come from. And they're trying to take that conversation back and say, no, I'm going to be making my own decisions in this regard. And I think that's a good thing.
It's it's talking about some of the topics like social stuff, exercise, diet, and I think like we're always looking for which supplement can I take or which
Hmm.
exercise program or which diet. I remember the book on the blue zones that came
Yeah.
out a handful of
Yeah.
years ago. We've
Uh-huh.
traveled to some of those places and not thinking that there'd be some magic. One of them we go to in Costa Rica
Mm.
quite often, the Guanacaste Peninsula, which is down on the uh, Pacific coast. Uh, you see their diet's not that amazing. It's
Hmm.
good, like, fruits, vegetables,
Yeah.
seafood. Um, but you see some people uh, drinking and, and I like some beer and wine, but the commonality that like it through like that guy's research seemed to be a lot of socialization,
Hmm.
purpose, where
Yeah.
it wasn't just trying to live, it was living because of,
Right.
my neighbor, my son, my family, my foundation that I work for, whatever. And
Hmm.
it it strikes me, I catch myself like today I'm driving here and I found that as I was driving while I'm paying attention, I wasn't. I was thinking
Hmm.
about this conversation. I was thinking about
Hmm.
what I was doing today, tomorrow, and like we get so focused on um, other shit, like we're never actually just being. And
Right.
I
Right.
I feel like in those places, like down in Costa Rica, there are those people. Their life is about just being. They
Yeah.
enjoy each other and they do things in a way that like life is life. It's not let me get to tomorrow or get to the
Right.
weekend or comment on that a little bit.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. The blue zone thing has been kind of disproven, at least as far as being, acceptable on the face of things as being, there's criticisms I think that are valid if you kind of read up on it. that said basically the whole blue zone thing was kind of cherry picked. And I'm not sure that's entirely the case. But I think what
I
you
mean, let
said,
me make sure I understand. I mean, there are
yeah,
literally places where they have high levels of long living people. Like that's a
yes,
fact.
that's a fact. But the theory that the person who came up with the Blue Zone book and the concept, the counter argument is that he kind of cherry picked this data,
Sure.
and that it's not as dramatic as he was saying, and that the reasons for the commonality isn't quite what he said.
I never
But
found any commonality
yeah,
that seemed
yeah.
actionable.
Yeah, well, there are some things like more of a whole food plant-based diet and that kind of thing, and the socialization and so forth. I think the point you make about the socialization being a really big part of it, I think, is it's very pertinent. There was a filmmaker, I don't remember who he was, Aguirre or somebody. Um, he was making these B movies and stuff, but he was saying, I don't consider filmmaking work. When I am up at 2 in the morning editing and just kind of grinding through this, I can't imagine wanting to do anything else with my life. It's not work if it's like this is awesome stuff. Now he doesn't make great movies, but he loves what he
Hmm.
does, right? And so I think if you've got a purpose in your life like that, and everything you do is just like, oh, this is amazing. Oh, I get a chance to talk to so and so. Let's make that happen, man. And it's not like, oh God, I've got to talk to so and so. That says a lot, and you're not grinding a whole lot of mental gears when you're doing that. You're flying through the gear shift box fast because you're loving this and you got someplace to go that's important, as opposed to, oh, I gotta climb this hill today. Oh damn. Oh God, here she comes. Not another. Oh, okay, here we go.
Hmm.
And having a lot of that in your life, I think, definitely is a problem. We know from a science standpoint that if you are stressed, your body pumps out certain hormones in excess, and those hormones do some pretty dramatically bad things to you in excess. I knew from even doing research in college, I was working in an immunology lab at UCLA, that if you introduce stress hormones into the system, certain immune functions go sideways. Your
We're
immune system
talking
doesn't
like
function as well.
cortisol.
Yeah, yeah, cortisol, things like that. Cortisol, adrenaline, insulin is released as a stress hormone, and too much insulin, too much cortisol, absolutely has some negative effects on the body. So the idea that if you love what you do, that you will be happier, sure, you may actually live longer and have fewer health problems because you're not having as much internally driven stress causing your body's functions to go sideways all the time. There is absolutely something to that. So I think that if the commonality in the blue zone thing is that you have all these people who are really centered in their life, and they're very present in what they do, and what they do isn't constantly questioning themselves in a hypochondriacal way, but they're focused on their community, they're focused on their neighbor, they're focused on getting the chickens, getting the eggs out of the chicken coop today. That level of like grinding their gears and having angst in their emotional life being very low, I think that's a really, really important thing.
Hmm. Seems like since day one of paper and writing, people, Marcus Aurelius, guys like this, have
Hmm.
talked about, thought about, passed on these things. And we're like, yeah, yeah, that's cool. I'll like share that little Instagram blurb where, Aristotle said some cool thing, and let me get back to my death scrolling and
Yeah.
my roast beef sandwich or whatever. It's kind of an interesting thing about the human animal, as you're talking about, um, like cortisol and
Hmm.
adrenaline. What if a guy's a fireman and he loves being a fireman, but every 45 minutes he's got this spike in these things and he's choking down freaking French fry casserole with the boys at night because that's what they got to do, and he's sleeping 3.5 hours a night. You know,
Yeah.
like that seems to be. Uh, so many people, even if you don't have a job like that, like an ER doc or nurse or a firefighter, how can we combat some of that stuff?
Well, it'd be nice if it was just all about health was all about one thing only, and you could guard that and protect it, and you'd be good to go. But human beings and human physiology is complicated. There's a lot of moving parts.
Mm.
So you could, be that filmmaker and love your life, but eat nothing but, chili cheeseburgers all day long, and you probably would have
Mm.
a circulation problem not too far down the road.
Are you
Um,
saying chili cheeseburgers are not good for you?
no, I think they're really good. They taste amazing. Um, Maybe not as a steady 3 time a day diet thing though.
Okay.
But no, the we know that firemen, for example, have a pretty high incidence of health problems.
Hmm.
And most commonly when they pass, it's from heart disease. Okay, but the toxin exposure and so forth probably isn't helping. But we also know that if you have people who do, all the right stuff, supposedly, and because they're constantly hovering over everything, they're not immune to having, from developing cancer. They're absolutely not immune from having things like depression. So it's not necessarily just about having a happy mental space, although that's a really important part of it. There's this concept that I learned about in college, and I've carried it over. This was back in college, and there was a higher math class I took. This thing called orthogonality, which means there's certain things like when you graph something on a graph, there's an x and a y axis. The x and y axis are independent of each other. So you can, if you plot a point out here, you can move it all the way over here on one axis and not move it at all on the other. Okay, they're separate from each other. In health, there are certain things that are orthogonal to each other, and you can't really have one make up for the other. There's sleep is important, exercise is important, socialization is important, so forth. And most people know the saying, you can't outrun a donut. Okay, you can't exercise to make up. You can't over exercise to make up for a poor diet. Okay.
Hmm.
And you can't, if you're super duper, if you're really super heavy, you're not going to get more sleep and get less heavy. All right. And if you're massively depressed, you're not going to be undepressed by eating more celery. Okay. There's certain things you have to do certain things. And there's thankfully a limited subset of really critical things to do, but each of them has to be done. You have to eat right. You have to get plentiful rest. You have to do inner work. You have to do some kind of strength training. I mean, there's certain things you just got to do. You got to see your doctor once in a while. Um, and if you don't do them, then the balance just doesn't work. And if you miss something, you're going to suffer from it. So that's a thing. But I would say nowadays people are increasingly aware of the importance of exercise. They're getting from thankfully from folks like Andrew Huberman. They're getting this idea that, oh, I got to spend more time outdoors, not just be indoors all the time. I need some sun on my face in the morning. Um, they are coming around after decades to finally getting the idea that, maybe doing this inner work is kind of a thing. Maybe I should be seeing a therapist. Why do I keep having these damn same arguments with my family all the time? Or I keep getting in these relationships and it's like I'm dating the same person each and every. Why is that happening? Why is this repeat happening? Well, maybe you should talk to somebody about that because we're not trained to do that ever, but there are
Hmm.
people who do this for a living. These things are becoming more commonly appreciated. People are starting to get them dialed in. And diet, the primacy of diet and the variables there. You can be vegan, you can be paleo, you can be vegan. There's different things there, but focusing on diet, just as opposed to eating in an undifferentiated way, like I'll just eat however I feel. The concept of maybe I should eat a certain way, whichever diet I choose, but I should eat kind of according to a certain kind of blueprint. That's a thing now that more and more people are coming around to.
Hmm.
So I think that things are improving in that way, partly because they've had to. And you made the comment earlier about about COVID and how it kind of blew everything up as far as people trusting the medical community. Like a lot of things, when there's a conflict, sometimes good things come out of that. You know, and I think people starting to ask questions, and some of the questions will be bizarre, and some conclusions will be hooey. But people asking questions and going, I'm not necessarily just going to take it on faith that it's okay for me to eat Cheerios all the time, or for me to eat, Trix and Doritos for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Maybe I should think this
It's part of
through.
a balanced diet.
Yeah. questioning, I don't think is a bad thing. And more people come to the other side of that and they realize I've got there's some healthier choices I can make by me questioning what I've accepted as being healthy my whole life. That's not a bad process, I think.
That brings up kind of an interesting thought for me, like what we accept based on how we're raised or the things that we're exposed to over and over again. Like, I was just telling my wife that something reminded me of a kid I grew up with. His breakfast every day was two Pop Tarts and a
Hmm.
20-ounce bottle of Coke. Before
Yeah.
school, as an adult, now in his 50s, he buys boxes, crates of Pop Tarts. He doesn't toast them. I couldn't tell you the last time I ate such a thing. And then a 2-liter bottle of Coke. And in his teens, 20s, 30s, that'd been followed by 3 or 4 cigarettes on the drive to work. And
Uh-huh.
um, I don't know what he looks like now, but they
I'm
had a
glad he's still with
drawer.
us.
What's that?
I'm glad he's still with us.
Yeah, he's still here. They had a drawer just full of the nastiest candy. And when I say nasty, I mean, like the chewy, stretchy, hard, crunchy, not to me like a nice chocolate bar or something is,
Mm,
not as bad as like some purple nerds or some kind of shit.
hmm.
But
Hmm.
they just ate this stuff at will all day long, him and his brothers, and that became normal. And
Yeah.
like I was talking about my mom, I remember getting upset with her, like well, why can't like we were at so and so's house and they had that. Like, why can't we eat that? And she'd be like, because that's trash. I'm not going to feed you that. And it's like, you don't care about me. You don't want me to have this delicious stuff. And so like we're it's this reconditioning. It's funny
Yeah.
though. I'll see people post stuff. A friend of mine I saw put something on Facebook the other day. And he's a young, fit-looking dude, but he's having like a new diet for the new year. And it was a picture of a cup of some total crap yogurt that
Hmm.
was, and I might be an extremist on this stuff. Like my
Hmm.
family,
Hmm.
we're kind of on the extreme, but
Hmm.
like it's some cow pus mixed with sugar in colors in a cup. And he's just got like this plate of stuff that like none of that is healthy. But
Hmm.
so I'm like, what were you eating that
All
this
right.
is worth you taking a
Right.
photograph?
This is an improvement, right?
Yeah, yeah, that this is the improvement. Where were we? But it like medicine. Here's kind of the thought. Like, okay,
Mhm.
so the doctors say all these things are good or bad. We believe them. We
Right.
make
Mhm.
choices. It shapes a culture. The food industry, got
Oh yeah.
milk, got beef, the other white meat, all these things, and
Hmm.
we get
Oh yeah.
inundated with them, and then it just becomes the norm. I've got plenty of friends that are very educated and they will vehemently argue that red meat will kill you and so eat it in
Hmm.
moderation. And then I got another buddy that's all he eats every day. His blood work's awesome. He only
Hmm.
eats steaks.
Yep. Yep.
Like so just talk about some of that stuff. It's just it's maddening to me. I know we've kind of
Yeah.
danced around some of those things.
Well, it again, at the end of the day, for me, working one-on-one, so there's a difference between, making broad statements about all of humanity and working with the one-on-one. So, uh, as a species, human beings, we got most of us, 2 arms, 2 legs, one heart, 2 kidneys, and so forth. There's certain things that apply as a general rule to all people, but there's a lot of individual variability. And what we have with the internet is a very well-known phenomenon is you can put something up that's like a testimonial for one person, and a lot of people will take it and run with it, and they'll step across the line and go, this one person's case, this one example applies to the general, to everybody, you know. So this person had wonderful success eating, a carnivore diet. That means, all humans would do better on a carnivore diet. And that's a leap. Okay, we know that there's a lot of differences between individuals. I mean, from a medical standpoint, there's differences between family members. What happens in one sibling doesn't apply to the other sibling. What your sister has doesn't apply to the brother. So we have to be kind of careful about that. But the natural human response to hearing stories like that, we are very, very story driven. And that's a whole other topic, I think.
Mm.
And so if you hear a great story, you like want to run with it and you want to tell your friends about it. That's a social thing. We did that around the campfire with, as cavemen. Um, Oh, Ugg went over there and he got eaten by the tiger. Don't be like Ugg. Yeah, let's
Don't
not
go
do
over
that.
there.
Yeah, don't go over there and all that. Everybody got that? Don't go over there. All right. So
Yeah, yeah.
everybody's doing, it's a very, very human response. But absolutely, there are people who will do better on a carnivore diet. We can test their labs and show, their cholesterol is beautiful, their blood pressure is amazing, their inflammatory markers are down, they feel great, keep going. And there's other people who do much, much better on a vegan diet. And there's people who are miserable on a vegan diet. So we know that there's a lot of variability that way. We just have to take that into account. But it is absolutely the case that different diets work. I think overall, I'd say I have no investment in whether a person eats one way or another. So if paleo works for you, if vegan works for you, if carnivore works for you, great, because I can prove that it works for you, and you can prove by telling me how you feel. What I don't recommend is that people don't think about it at all, that they just eat in an undifferentiated fashion, like, what do I feel like eating on the way home today? Oh, I'm passing by there. I'll just stop there. That is not a good idea. You're not going to get very far eating without thought. So that's the crossover that I recommend to people. But there's been an awful lot of variability out there in these diets that are recommended. What you said about your own background growing up, I think it's actually kind of uncommon.
Hmm.
When I grew up, because I grew up, I was raised by a single dad, and there was a lot of food he made, but there was a lot of food that we ate that was convenience based. And I
Sure.
remember drinking 7 Up, like Sprite today. I was drinking basically cans of 7 Up every day, like water. That was how I hydrated myself, was drinking 7 Up. Um, and so the idea that you grew up with your mom saying, that's garbage. We're not going to do that. You're going to have, uh, eggs, you're going to have, milk, you're going to have vegetables and meat. I think a lot of people now would look back at that and go, that's amazing. That's great.
Hmm.
That's not as typical, certainly now, and maybe
I
even
did
back
not
then.
appreciate it as a child, but
Yeah. I think it's probably helped you out a lot, you know.
I'm going to eat a
Um,
sumo orange while I'm talking to you.
okay, go for it. Go for it. Yeah. I think there are certain commonalities, and one of the things we all agree on now is that ultra processed foods are not good for you.
That's what I was going
Um,
to ask you about that. So
yeah.
define ultra processed versus processed.
Well, if you think of single ingredient foods like the orange you're peeling right now, okay, that's the opposite of processed. It's fruit off the vine, okay, or you throw some beef in the slow cooker and you cook it up with some broth and some potatoes and carrots, and you got roast beef or whatever later. Pretty much single ingredient stuff. You know what's in there. There's beef broth, carrots, potatoes, beef. Um, the more you add to it, the more it becomes processed. All right. Now, let's say you get a can of Dinty Moore beef stew. Okay, it's
Mm,
basically the same ingredients, but they had to, cook it in a factory. They had to throw it in a can. The can probably has some liner to it, and there's probably some extra ingredients in there that might be like, you know, uh, carrageenan or something like that, some kind of gum arabic to make the sauce be a little more smooth and less watery. So there's some additives in there, but you can pretty much recognize everything in that. And you could look at that and say, yeah, I could see my mom making that in a slow cooker. And then there's stuff that just is like, fire orange Cheetos. And
hmm.
it's like, there's nothing in the world that looks like this. Okay. You cannot go and pick a fire orange Cheeto off of a vine somewhere. And it comes in a bag. And that stuff is good on the shelf for 9 months.
Uh-huh.
Those classic videos of McDonald's hamburgers that just do not decay over like months. It's like it's kind of all right.
That's so
There's some
gross.
spooky stuff going on there. All right, when the food normally should go. I mean, my wife makes bread from grain. She grinds it herself. It makes grain, makes the powdered flour and makes the bread. And if
She
you're not careful
grinds
with
the
it,
grain. She
she grinds it.
purchases or
She's got one of those
mill.
little mills, yeah, that has the stone plates in it that grinds it up.
That's cool.
And it's really tasty. It's nice and dense, and it's really flavorful. And if you leave it out on the counter, it gets moldy in about
It'll
3 days.
rot. Yeah.
If you don't seal it away in a little bag or something. And that's what real food does. So the more you get it towards something that's super shelf stable, the more it has no resemblance to whatever. the more additives it has, where it's like you eat it. And like if you're eating an orange now, for example, you're not going to sit there and eat 9 oranges. Okay, you're going to eat an orange, maybe 2 oranges. You're like, you know, I'm
Don't
kind of
tell me
full.
what
That's
to
good.
do.
But you're not going to want to eat like a whole bunch of
No.
oranges. If you have one Reese's peanut butter cup, if you have 3 or 4 Doritos, I would challenge you to stop. Right? Even my wife tells me this because I used to do this. I could sit there and eat a whole bag of Doritos without thinking about it. You know, I'd be working,
That's
I'd just be,
shit, man. Why are you eating that?
right, right. Now I don't do that anymore. But foods like that that mash all of the buttons, you know, the umami button, the sweet button, all that, that make you crave eating more right away. Um, that's pretty clearly ultra processed as well, right? But the more it has, you know, funky colorings, the more it's packaged. I mean, basically, if it comes in a package over the counter, especially in a Mylar bag, it's probably pretty darn processed.
Hmm.
And I mean, there are definitions of what counts as ultra processed, but that's kind of like the rule of thumb thing.
Let me ask you something real quick. So you got that crock pot, you got a nice chunk of beef and
Hmm.
a bag of carrots that you bought, and maybe an
Hmm.
onion, and now all those things are
Yep.
individual ingredients made up
Yep.
of a bunch of elements, right? But
Yep.
was that carrot grown in some dirt that had a crop duster blast over it three or
Yeah.
four times? Was
Yep.
that beef injected full of tons of antibiotics?
Hmm.
Is it a genetically modified cow that makes its
Yeah.
muscle tissue do some crazy shit?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Think that this orange, these sumos, I don't think God or nature made this thing. You've seen
Yeah.
these. They're
Hmm.
delicious.
Yeah. With the yeah.
That
Hmm.
crazy ugly skin that peels right off. And
Yep.
it like is the sugar content of these or apples. I got a friend that grows apples and he's
Yep.
talked about it that like modern apples have a sugar content through the roof compared to
Yep.
historic apples were much smaller. Same with
Yep.
corn and all of these
Oh,
things.
corn, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like,
Bananas.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
bananas. I saw a food scientist that studied the history of food, and he'd show you
Mhm.
something on stage, and he'd go, "Okay, this is a banana, you know,
Right.
25,000 years ago," and
Right.
like explain to you how these things have changed from nature and man. So, like, how
Yep.
about those things? Should we be
Yeah.
concerned
Yeah.
about, you know, like, do I want to get a cow that my neighbor raised that had never had an antibiotic put in it, or you know what I'm
Hmm.
talking about?
Yeah. I mean, the probably the best known example of that is the antibiotic thing. Um, Most of the antibiotics used in America are not given to people with bacterial infections. Most of the antibiotics are used in feed, to feed livestock to grow that we consume, that we grow and eat the beef and the pork and whatnot. Because when you feed animals consistent diets with antibiotics, they actually put on fat and they get, you know, their meat gets more marbled and more tender and so forth.
Hmm.
So that's a thing. I mean, I think something like 80%, I haven't checked the stat recently, but I did at one point, something like 80%, don't quote me, but it's a high percentage of the antibiotics used in America are fed to feed animals. Um, and that's also a thought about why we have part of why we have antibiotic resistance among bacteria, because those antibiotics in the food supply are exposed to the bacteria that we're trying to fight off, and now they don't respond as well to the standard antibiotics we use. And antibiotic resistance is absolutely a thing in medicine. It's a big deal among infectious disease specialists in hospitals, where certain antibiotics don't work anymore, and now the infection runs rampant through the hospital. It's a big deal and has been a big deal for a long time. And that's just one example of that. So yes, going one step further, we may need to go one step further. Oh, these are single ingredients I can recognize. That's at the eyeball level. But at the microscopic level or at the biochemical level, yeah, there's issues with all these vegetables here have a dusting of glyphosate on them, or these fruits have a much higher content of sugar than, you know, we really should be eating. Maybe we should not have as much of the fruit anymore, or or whatever. You know, oh, this is a GMO thing. Maybe the bananas are fine, but the reality is, pretty much as I understand it, all the bananas we eat are genetic clones. They're bananas in the wild have different colors and different shapes. And we have this one yellow banana species that we think of when we eat bananas. And God, what happens if there's some, you know, genetic disease or some kind of mold thing that obliterates the banana supply? There's just one banana species out there that we all eat. So there are vulnerabilities going beneath that level, and I think there's something to be said for that. As we kind of get healthier and more aware of things, our the level at which we examine things gets better and better and better. What we talk about at the cutting edge of healthcare science, medical science, is doing things at a molecular or even at an atomic level. Being able to do things like splice DNA and help people who have certain genetic conditions or problems. Cloning, things like that. That's all molecular level stuff. Well, most people are working on the eyeball level stuff. How does that
Hmm.
look? And it's better than not examining the process at all. But a lot of the more cutting edge stuff happens, two, three, four levels, orders of magnitude more closely looked at, where you need, basically a biochemistry degree to really make sense of it all. But that's
Hmm.
okay as long as the learnings get transmitted up the line to everybody else. But you make some great points. It's a great start to say, I'm not going to have as many ultra processed foods. I'm going to have more single ingredient foods. I'm going to cook it myself so I know exactly what goes into it and what doesn't. Food prep it and so forth. That's a great start. And that, I think, leads to this other idea of in longevity, of whatever you do for yourself or your family personally, it's got to be sustainable. Okay.
Hmm.
Because there's a lot of things we can do in healthcare. That doesn't mean we should be doing all of it. Okay. So it's like, all right, there's 10 levels here we can go into. Levels 6 through 10, let your doctor worry about that, right? Levels 1 through 5, that's in your court. And if you don't do any of that stuff, it doesn't matter what I do at level 6 through 10, because you're going to screw yourself up, right? And I can't be there holding your hand every day, telling you to pick that and not that in the salad line. So these 5 things I want you to work on, all right? There's more to the story. Absolutely, there's more going on, okay? But from a practical standpoint, you've got to do these 5 or 4 or 6, whatever things, and that'll get you 70% of the way, there. And then the rest of the way, you and I can talk. And if I need to, I can grab some specialists and bring them on board, and we can get to levels 7, 8, 9. But if you're not doing levels 1 through 5, it doesn't really matter. Who is the guy? He's a former Navy SEAL trainer. He got into archery. Then he got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Um, what's the name of his? I'm blanking on his name. I'm sorry. I'll get back to you
I
on that.
think you're talking about uh I know him.
Maybe he's out in Idaho now, or Montana. He was out in Montana now.
Oh, Andy Stump.
Yes, yes, Andy Stump.
Andy's a
Um,
friend of mine. I thought you were talking about somebody else till you talked about him. Yeah, he's in California.
yeah,
Yeah, he was just here in town last week.
cool, cool. I was subscribing to his podcast early on, and he talked. Was it podcast or blog? But I think he wrote it in a blog post. He said something like, there's like the macroscopic and the microscopic, right? And that was something I took, and he said, it makes a lot of sense to dial in the big things first. And a lot of people are focused on the little micro stuff. And you can talk about whether you should take this supplement or not, but really doesn't
Uh,
make sense to talk about that if you haven't gotten, you haven't dialed in basic strength training, you haven't dialed in your diet, you haven't
you're
dialed in your
drinking
rest and so
a
forth,
case of beer a night and yeah,
right?
living off Big Macs.
Yeah. It's that whole thing about you go to a self-defense shooting class and there's people focusing on, can I have a sub 1 second draw? And they're like 350 pounds. It's like you're more likely to have other issues than being attacked, man. So maybe you should work on some other things too. The whole idea that there's, it like in a microscope, in school when you're in bio class, and everybody had their microscope and they're looking at like flower petals or whatever. There's a big wheel and then there's a little wheel, right? And the big wheel makes the lens go up and down like this, and the little wheel makes the lens go up and down a little bit because you're fine tuning, right? You can get the lens to focus by twirling the little wheel a whole lot, or you can get 80% of it with one tweak of the big wheel and then a little tweak of the little wheel. It
I
makes
like
sense to get
that.
the big wheel dialed in.
Yeah.
And that's something that concept I got from Andy. I modified it a little bit, but I got from him. But that's something I tell people as well, is that you just really want to try and get some of these big ticket items dialed in, that the doctor cannot do for you, right? But some of the more fine-tuned stuff, some of the more in-depth, molecular bio type stuff, hormonal stuff, chemical stuff, your doctor hopefully can kind of help you through with that. And you can do your own research on that as well. But the big stuff you got to dial in every day. And that's what, that is within your power. That is within your reach to do. And that's something that people are coming to terms with finally as well.
So you've got this idea that we should be able to age and continue doing sports and things like that. I know not everybody's the same. I'm a pretty physical guy. I'm near 50, and I've got friends that are pushing 60 that are still winning national and
Mm,
world jiu-jitsu titles. I've got a buddy, his name's Todd, who's about 50. He wins everywhere he goes. He's like a four-stripe black belt.
wow.
Excellent, excellent dude. And then you see these guys blow a bicep tendon. I think I've had 6 friends in the last 2 years pop a bicep tendon.
Yep.
So like personally, I want to be able to perform, but I'm like, damn, I don't really feel like having knee surgery or,
Yeah.
my arm in a sling for 3 months and
Yeah.
months of recovery. And sometimes it's stupid stuff like,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
opening a can of pickles or something, and it was the
Hmm.
last straw. Of course, the joint's
Yep.
probably already trashed if that's what blew it. But
Hmm.
how does a person find like, where's the enough's enough and
Yeah.
how I see a lot of people that won't get on the mat anymore, or oh,
Hmm.
I can't do deadlifts, or I'm never going to do squats because that's bad for your knees. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
no, it's not. Where do you find
Yeah.
like where's the right and wrong? And I know it's an individual thing, but comment on that a little bit.
You bet. I mean, this was what prompted me to come up with the particular approach that I have because that so closely parallels my own history. And so I have a coaching offering that I do that's based on my own personal experience. Um, I had, I wasn't a star athlete by any means in high school or college, but I was moderately athletic. I played intramural sports at UCLA just for fun. I came from a small high school. We had 50 students from 9 through 12. The high school had 50 kids in it, right? So very, very small, very small pond. You could be a big fish in a small pond. But I got to play. We all had court time. I got to play basketball. I got to play football. Got to play volleyball. Got to do fencing. We had to, everybody could participate. Um, and yet, when I got into med school, a lot of that fell by the wayside. And so I had a period of being very active, getting into martial arts in college and med school, and then it kind of faded, and I got real busy, and I let that go to the side. You don't have to, but I did, and I decided to get back into it after a while, and then I got injured. I mean, I started into something. I was like, I remember how to do this, and 2 weeks later, bam, I had a calf tear. Like, oh wow, that was kind of weird, and I rehabbed from that. It took me a while, and then like, okay, now I'll get back to it, and I got back into it. Bam, 2 weeks later, I strained a knee ligament. I pulled my MCL. Like, damn, how did that happen? And so that I had this happen like 3 or 4 times. And I'm like, all right, I'm doing something wrong here. And I'm a physician. I'm a sports medicine trained physician. I kind of know what to do, and I don't because I keep getting injured. I'm like, what the hell's happened? Um, so came up with a strategy, got some help. I said, all right, I gotta go to somebody else because I'm not doing this by myself, clearly. And I went to a coach and he said, all right, here's what you're doing wrong. And we worked together, we came up with a program, and I got back. And then from that point on, I've been able to gradually reapproach and get back into jiu-jitsu and to do so now for the past 7 years.
Hmm.
Training more now consistently than I ever have in my life. Now, a couple issues there. Wherever you're starting from, you want to kind of do an assessment of where you want to be at. All right. And sometimes that assessment is going to be that's not a reasonable goal for you. No matter how gradually you train, that's just too high a goal to set.
You
All right.
suck, Bob.
Or if Bob has never done anything physical at all with his life, ever, not even in high school or anything. He has no familiarity with working out. And his goal is, I want to be on the winner's podium at the ADCC or something. Or I want to I want to medal in the Olympics. It's like, all right, great aspiration. Um, Probably not going to happen, but let's work with
Give
that a
me
little.
give me that joint that you're smoking, Bob.
Right. Okay. But usually people who come at this from being, having previously been active, they have an idea of what they're capable of. They know that, my goal isn't to be on the podium. My goal is to participate 3 times a week and not just be happy to just participate. Or I want to participate and I want to maybe compete, a few times a year at a local tournament or something. And these are not unreasonable goals. So they're okay, fine. Right. Now we go, all right, well, where are you? And what level of activity are you aiming to get into, and what injuries do you have, right? Because if you have some injuries going in, you got to get that handled going in, all right? But basically, the process is to say, probably what's happened to you is you've tried to do things way quicker than your body is able to adapt, and your body adapts whether you like it or not. So it's gonna adapt. It will get better at whatever you're trying to do, but it may not get better fast as you think it will, right? And the older you get, the more time it takes for you to for your body to kind of adapt, which is why when we're young, you can be in the gym 5 days a week lifting. And when you're 50, maybe twice a week is all you can do because you need that recovery between the workout sessions, right? So a lot of people have a timeline dialed into their minds is just way too fast. I'm like, all right, slow down, all right? At a minimum, you're going to need to do this graded approach to getting up to full activity at least for 3 months. And people are like, really? You know, I was gonna, and for me, I kept blowing things out. Literally, I blew things out like because I was 2 weeks into it, and something would
Were you
happen.
just really aggressive? Were you like trying to win training?
I did not think so, but the problem was this is where it works against you having a background in the activity, the martial art or whatever. Your brain remembers how to throw the punch.
Sure.
Your brain remembers how to throw that full power roundhouse kick, but your connective tissue is now 30 years older and you haven't been doing it for a while. So while your brain's at 100% and can fire off that reflex, like, boom, 100% go. Your ligaments, your tendons, your muscles are maybe at 40%. And that's when you tear things. Okay. Or you haven't done anything in a while and you get in a weird position and you freeze or you flail, you go, oh, and when you suddenly try to save yourself from the fall, your brain sends a reflex to your spinal cord to fire off those muscles like 100% to save you from face planting or whatever. And your muscles go from 0 to 110% in a fraction of a second, and you tear something. So your body, my body, was just weaker, and my brain didn't remember that. And so I was doing these kicks that I'd done 10,000 times before. I'm like, yeah, I can do this. And the trainer goes, yeah, a little harder. I'm like, fine, I can do this. Boom. And then my calf went, ah. But I didn't think I was overdoing it. All right. It's just that all it takes is a moment and that reflex arc to kick in, and then your connective tissue isn't ready for it and it tears. So to make your connective tissue more resilient, to build up to the level of the activity that you want to get back into takes time. Your muscles, your nervous system adapts within minutes, if not hours or days. Your muscles get stronger over the period of, a few weeks. Your ligaments and tendons and connective tissue probably take about 2 or 3 months to kind of firm up and get, more resilient. And your bone structure, if your bones are weak, that takes even longer. Okay. But most people are thinking in a time frame that's more appropriate to their nervous system, not to their connective tissue. The connective tissue takes time. So the number one lesson I try to communicate to people is you got to give your body time to adapt. It's going to adapt, guaranteed, but not if it doesn't have enough time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's always been an interesting point with people. You're there to learn to develop a skill to protect yourself, and then you trash yourself because you can't meter yourself. And I've been guilty of it. My friends call me 110 Mick, and I always tell them you've never seen 110, but I've never had any like major
Yeah.
issues. I am missing a medial head on this arm
Mm,
that got tore in a demonstration one day with an arm bar. I tapped, but he kept yanking and it popped off. And I just thought it was tore. And now,
mm-hmm,
now it's gone forever. I thought it was just like a stretch or,
mm-hmm,
bruise, but now she's gone. But
yeah.
um, it's amazing how many times I see people that are there to help themselves, and I'll grab guys by the face and just say, dude, just we're not fighting. We're not fighting,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
just relax. We're not fighting each other. Like we can if you want to, but that's not, it's not what we're doing. Just relax.
yeah. And they're
It's
not doing it on purpose. It's the white belt syndrome, right? When you're
I've
rolling
seen
with
guys that
people.
are a lot beyond white belt do it though too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, there was a visiting blue belt at our gym who came and was rolling with some of us. Clearly more advanced. He was like, I think he's a 2 or 3 stripe blue belt, and he was rolling with us. And we're like, we haven't those in the class. We did not have our first stripe blue belt yet, and he was rolling with us, and it was like, dude, you're just so tense. And this is blue belts, right? He's like, dude, you're white knuckling it the whole time. Just relax, man. Um, and nobody does it on purpose. It's not like I'm going to clench while I roll with these people. It's new stuff, and they're going full body, and you're like, oh, self defense mode, and it just happens. It takes a while to kind of get to that point. You're like, no, let's just roll, man. Let's just. I worked with a collegiate judo squad. I was lucky enough to work during my sports medicine fellowship with San Jose State, which has, I would argue, the number one collegiate judo program in the nation.
Hmm.
A lot of their athletes go to the Olympic Training Center and end up being like representing the U.S. in the Olympic team. And one of the athletes there, she said from the gym, and they were like, "Oh, doc, you can roll with us, sure." And so I was like, "Man, this is great." And one of them, she told me about this drill at her gym where she came from called roly poly. And what it was you basically roll at like 40%, 30, 40, maybe 50% intensity. And the idea would be you get in a position and they go into submission, you tap, then you'd roll and you would get the position, you do the submission, they tap, you kind of go back and forth. It was just kind of this cooperative rolling play. And that's so cool. And that's so foreign to most of us because that is very against the natural instinct.
Yeah.
But
We do that. We
that's
do that every day.
yeah, that's great. But that's a developed skill because you have to kind of overcome your natural reflex to go,
We
gonzo
call
all
it
the time.
flow rolling.
Yeah, yeah,
Flow through positions, but you have to like allow somebody to do things to you. Okay, I
right.
feel he's trying to mount me. Okay, I feel he's trying to take my back and slip his hooks in. Go ahead, get him in there. All right, I'm gonna bridge out now, and he's gonna let
Hmm.
me do that. It
Yeah.
requires a partner that has some understanding too.
Hmm. And it's not that you're trying to train yourself to um, allow vulnerabilities to happen. You know, it's what you're trying to train yourself in doing is this mode of not spazzing out all the time, of not
Hmm.
like white knuckling and death gripping your whole way through the roll. Um, because so many things open up when so I'm told, not that I've gotten to this point myself yet, but I've been told that so many things open up when you have that mindset. And yes, there's vulnerabilities, and oh, he's putting an armbar on me. Well, I'll let him do that. Yeah, you're not going to do that in a real fight. I get it. But what you're trying to incorporate and learn is more this idea of being able to be much more relaxed, much more open to things, much more able to flow, as you put it, so that when the time comes, if you're more in this mode and you're going more full speed, you can see things happening before they happen and get there ahead of the guy, which is hard to do when you're like, oh my God. Um, and that's a skill. It takes doing. It's a very counterintuitive. You don't develop it unless you just luck into it.
Did you practice judo?
When I was with the judo team, yes, and that was a cool year. Yeah.
That's very cool. I have a good story that relates to what you just said about the body remembering, but not
Uh-huh.
possibly being capable. I interviewed Jimmy Pedro, who,
Yeah.
is kind of
Yeah.
a legend. And I asked him, so his dad is still working with him. And
Hmm.
I said, do you still grapple? Do you still like practice the art? And he goes, not like I used to, but
Hmm.
he said he was in, I don't know, Europe somewhere in like the the champion of the country that they were in
Hmm.
approached him and just said, sir, would you give me the honor of, I don't know the correct word, randori, is that it?
Uh-huh.
Of
Yep.
of rolling around here. So he's like, yeah,
Yeah.
sure, whatever. They lock up and he says it was like 1, 2, 3. He was gonna throw this dude, planted his foot, turned, and everybody's watching like 100 people. His
Mm.
hamstring just blows, completely
Oh
disconnects.
wow.
He's on
Oh
the mat. He goes, I put my foot down to do something I've done 10,000 times,
yeah.
turned to do the throw, and blew his hamstring. And they, 10 seconds after this has begun, they're carrying him off to go,
Mhm.
for what turned into months of hell and
Yeah,
recovery and surgery and
yeah,
all
yeah,
that.
yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
here's how do we get to a point where we don't have that crap happen? And is it possible? Can we go through without having hamstrings and biceps disconnect?
Yeah, I think it is possible to do. Um, Understanding that, yes, however, at certain levels of participation and competition, injury possibility never goes away. Okay.
Okay.
So, certainly there are martial arts where, or athletic endeavors in general. If you're working out with machines, if your workout consists of doing 10 minutes of walking or jogging on the treadmill, then doing the weight circuit a couple of times, then maybe jumping in the sauna and calling it a day, you're very unlikely, not zero, but you're very unlikely to have something major happen to you, pulling a muscle, tearing something. The more uncontrolled the sport, the more uncontrolled moments there are, the more there are opportunities for somebody else to oppose you. The more likely that something will exceed the force of the tensile strength of your connective tissues on that day. All right, and that's just part of a competitive sport.
That was very sciency.
You know, your body can only sustain so much. Let's put it that way. Okay. But what you can do is you can look at your sport and say, okay, if we're talking about high levels of stress from my grappling, from my rock climbing, from my whatever, being this level here, right? And typically, given on any given roll, on any given day, my body will be exposed to this much stress and this much force. Okay. And right now, where you're at is my body's right about here. Okay. There's ways you can train your body to get the resilience of connective tissues up to and hopefully above the level of what your sport's going to do. All right. But it takes time to get there. And you can absolutely do that, though. Most of the time, in my experience personally, the ways you prepare your body for the sport are to do the sport. Okay.
Hmm.
Because I tried this myself and I got injured. I was like, oh, and full kudos and cheers to Pablo Satsouline. But I latched onto his program where you're doing these two lifts. I think you're doing deadlifts and I think side presses. It's like do these and do these every day, and it'll prepare you for all kinds of things. There's the what the hell effect. It's going to be great. I was like, okay, I'm going to do that, and did that for a while. I mean, I did probably for a year, and then I went out and I went all out and blew something 2 weeks into it. So I think the strength training, the cardio, the stretching, all that is absolutely important, but it's not going to prepare you for the specificity of your sport activity. Your sport activity will prepare you for the sport activity. When you're rolling, everything you need to do, all the structures that get challenged and so forth in the roll happen from you rolling. It's not going to
Hmm.
happen from you doing deadlifts and bench press. Okay. Not that that's not valuable in other ways, but the ultimate prep for the activity is to do a graded return to the activity within the activity. Okay.
I like that.
Yeah. But the other stuff that you need to do, I think, is important too, because when you're doing bench press, you are strengthening the connective tissues of your anterior chain. When you do your back squats, when you're doing your deadlifts, when you're doing whatever, all those things are being challenged also. All the connective tissues connected to that are being challenged. It's just not necessarily in the way that's sports specific, but it's being challenged and you're getting adaptations and getting stronger, more resilient, way more so than you sitting on the couch. No question. All right.
Hmm.
So let's say you're doing the outside strength program, the basic lifts, the basic six or whatever the basic set is for you, the push, the pull, the squat, the ab, the whatever. All right, let's say doing that tones and prepares your connective tissue 50% of the way, maybe 60% of the way. All right. But you need 100%. Right. And that last 30, 40, 50% is you doing your sport, but starting off at a low level. Okay. When I got back into jujitsu, what the coach I was working with basically said was, all right, let's start with you doing stuff solo, me and you on the mat. You're going to do some exercises that kind of simulate some of the things we're doing. You're going to sit up on the wall. You're going to roll from side to side. We're going to get a Swiss ball out there. You're going to roll around the Swiss ball. It's you and gravity. So you have total control of everything that's going on. Nothing fun, nothing funky, nothing that your body is prepared for, nothing shocking. We're going to walk through these exercises. We're going to do them together. All right. So you did that. All right. I did that. And after a while, he's like, okay, now we're going to add a little layer here. All right, now we're going to have you do some more resisted work on the Swiss ball and do this and this and this and this. Okay, okay, good. And now we're going to do some of these moves, and we're going to actually get down on the mat, and we're going to actually go through some positions. Totally no resistance whatsoever, right? And we'll walk you through, this is what side control looks like. This is what a kimura looks like. This is okay, get the vocabulary down. Zero resistance. But now we're actually rolling kind of a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
We're going through positions, kind of like going through a class, right? And then after a while, it was like, can I actually maybe get back on the mat and go light? And he's like, yeah, it's time. But I'm going to pick the partners for you, right? And so got into class and said, hey, you're going to work with Frank today. And Frank, I've already told Frank about your background and stuff. So you're going to go with Frank, no more than 20% resistance, right? Did that for a while. And as I'm going through this, nothing's breaking, nothing's popping off. And I'm already way more than 2 weeks into it when normally something would go. And then after a while, it's like, okay, yeah, now you're in the class and you're going 20%, you're doing okay with it, go for it. And not 100%, but now you can go and now to kind of moderate things. But it was this very gradual process. And that I think should parallel how you get back into doing whatever it is you're going to be doing for the first level goal. And that first level goal is I want to show up in class and leave and go home in one piece, right?
Not
And
not lay in bed going,
right, or saying, "Oh, what's the speed dial for my doctor?" Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and for the longest time, because I've been re-injured so many times, I was like, God, all I want out of this is to be able to go to class 2, maybe 3 times a week and not die, but not have things pop off. And it took a surprising amount of time to get there, but then I got there. And then, of course, what happens, and then in my case, it happened after about 2 or 3 years, was I've been able to go kind of regularly and nothing bad happened. And, now maybe I can try and get good at this. And so my next level goal is I want to get a little bit more adept. Okay. And then I was like, okay, now we're doing that more and focus more on technique and focusing more on combinations and da 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 da. And so you get that. And then after a while, probably the next goal after I have that is going to be something else. And for other people, it may be different. For other people, it might be I want to be able to participate 3, 4 times a week. They never, for them, that's it. That's all they want out of life, and they're good. All right. Other people might say, yeah, okay, got there. Now I want to compete. I want to compete locally and stuff. Okay. And if they keep going up that chain and they're like, no, this is great. I want to compete nationally. I want to go to ADCC. I want to do that. That's fine. But they're gradually working their way up through the system and they're putting more and more demands on their body. And at some point, they get the feedback of, okay, this is enough. Not necessarily because their body's breaking down, but because they're like, to go to the next level, I need to be able to travel 3 times a month to go to these seminars. I need to be able to compete and do XYZ. And, my job just won't let me, or my family needs me here and I can't do XYZ. So at that point, they're like, all right, yeah, I park it here. Okay. Because as we get older, not necessarily an age thing, but the complexity of life thing,
Mm.
there's other factors that probably have a greater influence on what we can do in our activity than our bodies, right? When I stopped training, it wasn't because my body gave out. So I was probably at the peak of whatever you would say, my physical capacity could be at that point. It was because I had a whole lot of other responsibilities. I had family responsibilities, professional responsibilities, medical training responsibilities. I was teaching at that point. And that was why I was like, yeah, I can't go to class, you know? So if unless you have like a very, very ultra simple life, if you have kids, if you have family you take care of, if you have work responsibilities, there's going to be a limit to how many hours in the day and how many days a week you can do your outside training. And that may be the more determining factor.
I train with a bunch of dudes that are world class to
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
hobbyists. And
Uh-huh.
there's some guys, one of them, his name's Rich. Maybe I'll send this to him so he can hear it. But black belt, excellent
Mm.
guy, super fit in his 60s.
Great.
Smaller built guy, 150 maybe, 155. If
Uh-huh.
I'm wrong, Rich, I love you. I don't care. I mean, he'll tell you, he's like, I'm not going to beat up 22-year-olds anymore Like I'm not willing to risk the damage. I'm here to have fun. It like you have to change the way you approach it. And I always think to myself, like there's a couple of young guys at our school. I know way more than them, but they're my kids' age, and like there's nature has laws, and
Hmm.
I can get upset about it, or I can say like I had my turn to be that kid, and now I'm just gonna be the best version of my 50-ish-year-old self, and that's just that, you
Oh
know?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, uh, there's my first jujitsu coach, who is amazing, who is the one who rehabbed me and helped me get back on the mat altogether. He teaches self-defense, and I've been through a bunch of years of self-defense and what passes for self-defense and whatnot. He has a background in the sort of Inosanto Academy, Kali kind of stuff, trapping hands, Bruce Lee, JKD type stuff as well. And I have a background in that when I was in college. And he graduated way past that. And he's like, all right, this is stuff that I'm teaching you a self-contained thing because this works and it's not pretty, but it works. And I'll get you his information here later. But the emphasis, I think, when you are doing real self-defense is all the stuff we're thinking about in sport jujitsu kind of goes sideways, you push it off to the side,
Mm-hmm.
um, because you understand that if you're actually physically attacked, you're probably going to be attacked physically by more than one person, and you're probably going to get physically attacked by people who are younger and stronger and faster than you, right? So right away, the idea of you get to pick your roles, you get to roll with somebody else who's kind of your level. They're going if they're a higher belt, they're going to take care of you. All that goes out the window. That doesn't apply anymore. Okay, and so how do you uh, survive a situation like that? Is you cheat. Okay, you apply a cheat code. You're going to funnel them down a very narrow chute of activity that you're very, very good at, and you're going to get them there, and you're going to take care of business as quickly and efficiently as you can, or you're just going to get the hell out of there. Okay.
I'll
Again,
bite you.
yeah, yeah, kinamutai, the Filipino thing, but you're not going to go toe to toe with them. Okay. Um, and that's a different mindset. And I think that's important to do as well. So when you're a black belt in your 60s, and I aspire to be a black belt at some point, when you're a black belt in your 60s, um, it makes total sense for training longevity to pick your partners because probably from having been injured, probably finding out the hard way, that if you're not prudent about that, even as a black belt, you can have something unexpected and injurious happen. Henner had something happen to his neck his back a while back, and he recently had
Mm-hmm.
something happen that was kind of a weird thing with his finger,
His
as I
finger.
understand it. Yeah, he had to actually amputate. He decided to amputate the tip of it. But the back thing was he got injured in a roll. I think someone stacked him. I
I
believe it
think they
was.
ended up leaving that fingertip. He
Oh,
got a surgery done
oh,
and
that's
they
right. That's right.
saved.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, they were able to save it. That's right. But the back thing was when he was rolling, and this is Henry Gracie, okay. Um, and I think if you talk to any high-ranking person, they've had their share of injuries. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so clearly injuries happen, and if you're going to train with longevity, meaning you're going to regularly train and not blow something out and be off the mat for 6 to 9 months or a year, then you have to make certain training concessions to reduce the risk. And that may be choosing your partners. It may be agreeing to you're going to roll at 60% efficient, 60% intensity today or whatever. Um, but you're going to get more out of the experience than if you didn't train at all because you were sidelined with an injury. So you make modifications and you train with less intensity. You train with partners who know you and so forth, so you can keep training regularly because that's the must be present for you to continue to maintain your skills and to adapt and to improve is you've got to be able to keep going. So if anything interferes with your ability to consistently keep getting on the mat, that's bad. All right. That's a thing to avoid. Right. But what we know from self-defense training is when the chips are down, you don't have you aren't going to be able to initiate those things, right? To introduce those safeguards anymore. And so how do what is that? What's the conclusion you have there? Like I was saying, is you cheat. right? Um, and that mindset is an adjustment for a lot of people because they're so used to what is basically a sport jujitsu or an exercise and health mindset. Okay, where the emphasis is on longevity, the emphasis I got to go to work tomorrow. I got to I want to be able to train the day after tomorrow. And so those adjustments, you have to be able to, if you're doing more of a self-defense mindset, you have to kind of say, nope, I got to have a whole other set of guidelines here for this. And so the
I
idea
refer
of,
to that as training for violence.
yeah, yeah. And so if you're doing that, which is fine, then a different set of rules apply. And you just have to be aware there's a different set of rules. And that goes into the 60-year-old friend of yours who's like, I can get trashed by a white belt. That absolutely is a thing. And so is there a way to train to prepare for that? And the answer is yes, to a certain point. You can do things in training, you can have a training schedule, an intensity schedule that actually periodically goes up to pretty high intensity. Not all the time because you're going to trash your body, but once in a while, you're going to go all out, right? And you're going to do so. Just 1 second here. Sorry. And you're going to do
Yes, sir.
so in a structured way so that your body's able to recover from it. Like if you go to an ECQC evolution with Craig Douglas, right, and his crew, you're probably not going to do that every week. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to do it. You're going to recover for 3 months. Um, but you do so in such a way that your body does know what it's like to really push once in a while. Okay, so let's say you theoretically prepare your body connective tissue wise and whatnot to go all out against an opponent who's younger and stronger and very, very determined. Great. You still apply cheat codes. Okay. You still say, I'm not going to walk down that dark alley all by myself. Or I'm not going to go out if you have a concealed carry permit. I'm not ever going to leave the house without my concealed carry. Or I'm never going to go XYZ places all by myself. I mean, you do certain things that tilt the odds in your favor, um, which is again a different mindset than the sport mindset. Sport mindset being we're both coming to the mat, we're clapping hands, we're equal, we're kind of, so you apply cheat codes. Um, and so some of the answer is, is there a way so that I can do these roles with these young guys and not get blown out and stuff? And the answer is no, unless you cheat. And that's entirely appropriate in a self-defense situation, but not necessarily in a sport training situation.
Wait a minute. I mean, I can dominate younger men through technique without
Oh yeah,
cheating.
sure, sure you can.
And
Yeah.
because I'm not a bitch, that's actually what I tell them. I have a thing. This is kind of like my thing. I like to get on top of a younger man and I will do something like a really janky wrist lock with just one hand. And they'll go, "How are you doing that?" And I whisper in
Mhm.
their ear, "Because I'm substantially stronger than you." And then if they say something else, I just tell them, "Ask their mom." And I say, "Ask your mom. She knows."
I'm wondering if you have somebody editing your stuff who could just take out that little clip of you get on top of a guy. Um, and then whispering in his ear, we'll jump to
Drew's
that.
heard. Drew has heard it all. We've worked together for a decade. He's heard it all. Uh,
Yeah.
I, I appreciate you. We are an hour and 40 minutes into this, so
Mm. Hmm.
I'm gonna give you this prep. If the
Okay.
people listening
Yeah.
never meet you, never cross your path, never see your face or hear your
Yeah.
voice again, what would you leave them with?
Bummer. Um,
No, this
well,
is like a great
yeah.
opportunity. This is
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is like you writing down your 10 commandments.
Well, first off, well, I'll put that last. If they aren't ever going to meet me again, I'd just say email me at Peter at drpbkim.com, drpbkim.com. Just email me. But I would say
Definitely
this.
yes. Give me before you close it out. How do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, just email me would probably be the best. I have, an X account. I've got a Substack and so forth. I've got a newsletter.
Dr. Peter Kim.
Right. That's me, Dr. Peter Kim.
I mean
Um,
that's it on X or Instagram, I believe.
I think it's Dr. PB Kim, DRPBKIM1. That's my X handle. And Dr. PB Kim is, I think, I'll give you the info on Insta and Substack. Um, uh, I would say that the most important thing to know is that you have to ask that question periodically. How's it working for you? And if the answer is, I don't know, or it's not working that well for me, then you should re-examine what it is you're doing and change it up. Okay. That's the basic underlying workflow for everything, in my opinion, in healthcare and in personal care. Whether it's mental health issues or it's you're not being able to lose the weight or physical, whatever. It's what am I doing and how's it working for me? Because a lot of people just do not examine what they're doing. They just kind of go to the next thing and they just kind of wander through life with no direction. You have to basically pause once in a while and go, man, let me check this out. Let's see where I'm at. And if it's going well, great, keep going. If it's not going so hot, you got to change it up. And a lot of times you'll need to change it up with some help. Okay. None of us gets through life all by ourselves. And so if you could do it, but it would take 9 hours a day to do it, then you probably want to, hire someone or go talk to someone or get some advice from someone who does that for a living and can take care of it in 5 minutes. Okay. That's, I think, the main take home. One other take home I'd say is this. I think most people are aware of the idea that ultra processed foods are no bueno for you. I would say the most ultra processed thing in the world is not food. The most ultra processed thing in the world is being on our digital devices.
Mm-hmm.
Every single pixel, if you're watching this as a video, every single pixel on the screen is being managed, being recorded, especially if you're watching social media. Everything, single thing you see on the screen, every pixel, every color, every motion blur is created and processed in the most highly processed manner on earth. If the algorithm is serving something up to you, you're looking something up and it throws you something you think you'll be interested in, the amount of iterations that thing it just presented you goes through in 1 second is more than all the competitive iterations it took to take a wild wolf to a chihuahua, over time. Okay. It's the most intense and insane natural selection pressure, artificial selection pressure, the evolutionary pressure on Earth that we have ever known is what's happening in social media and getting things presented to you by the algorithms. So think about that. If there's a selection pressure that can go from wolves to dogs, that pressure is happening on social media every second that you're on it. And that has some consequences. The most ultra processed processes on earth are the digital processes, and those are not in your control. Those are under the control of the writers of the algorithm. They're under the control of, ultimately, Larry Ellison and his server farms and Jeff Bezos. They are under the control of whatever the corporations that are subsidizing XYZ platform. And they're generally not doing it for your health and benefit. They're doing it for your attention. They're doing it for your money. They're doing it to influence your decisions. So keep that in mind as well. And I think reducing the most ultra processed exposure you have is a very good health decision as well.
I agree. These things are the devil. All these apps and stuff. That's a whole nother conversation we should have another time.
Would love to.
I appreciate you guys coming on. You guys that viewed and listened, depending on where you're at, please do like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. I will put in the show notes the doctor's account so you can give them a follow. Please, again, give the email.
Peter at drpbkim.com, drpbkim.com.
And you're in Southern California, so if somebody's
Yep.
local and they wanted to do some one-on-one personal stuff, but do you also
Absolutely.
do remote coaching?
Mm-hmm. Remote coaching, and if you want to see me as a in a patient physician way, if you're in California, because I've got to practice medicine in the state, happy to see you.
Perfect. As always, folks, be well. Don't be dickheads. Tell somebody you love them, and do check out our coffee, which is delicious. Ignis Lux Coffee, which is Latin for firelight. I'll be sending you some, Doc, if you like high quality coffee. If you're into that ultra processed trash, I don't have anything for you.
I'd love some.
Awesome. Visit our website, carrytrainer.com, for information about classes held throughout the U.S., Carry Trainer apparel, and upcoming projects. You can also email us at training@carrytrainer.com for information about setting up your own private course or speaking engagement. Training@carrytrainer.com or carrytrainer.com. Well, thank you for tuning in. Dr. Kim sure added a lot. Go follow him. Check the show notes for how to get a hold of him. As always, these podcasts are brought to you by our good friends at Super Bell Ammunition, Gunfighter Gun Oil, our product, Ignis Lux Coffee, our product, and our good pals at Securit Tactical. Securit gun cabinets like the one back here are made in the USA, and if they are good enough for the United States Marines, United States Army, Navy, and Air Force, they are probably good enough for whatever it is you want to put in there. Check them out at securitgunstorage.com.